This video has been sponsored and approved by Hero Entertainment. The game we're looking at today is Out of War Red Tides. Now, why did I get interested in a mobile game? I usually wouldn't look into something like that, but the reviews in the iOS store were absolutely amazing and the game is free to play, so I figured might as well give it a try. Furthermore, a Steam version of the game exists, so even if you don't own any Apple devices, you can still play the game. On top of that, the visuals looked relatively nice for a mobile game while also being somewhat fluid. After the initial testing, I figured that it was a very RTS-focused game and had a very StarCrafty vibe to it. And this is not actually a surprise if you look a little bit into the background of the game, as it's actually inspired by Desert Strike, a map for StarCraft 2. And in case you're unaware, the entire MOBA genre would not exist without mods for StarCraft and Warcraft, namely Defense of the Ancients and something in StarCraft before that I don't even remember what it was called, but those were the basis for those games, so it's not atypical to have relatively good games coming out of sort of like mini mods for strategy games, and that really got me interested even more. So what exactly is Out of War? It's branded as real-time global combat, so pretty close to RTS right there. And it's kind of a linear strategy game where you have two clashing waves of your units and the enemy units, maybe similar to a MOBA in a sense where you have control over the wave. You will be deciding which characters are in those waves, which kind of units you send out, and they spawn at a certain time, and when the timer runs down the next wave spawns, and then they fight each other in the middle. On top of that, you have special abilities, you have certain things that you can use to advantage, like abilities of certain units that you spawn, etc, etc, and certain units obviously counter others. There's only one lane where characters can clash, which makes the game relatively fast-paced. It makes it more accessible than the classic RTS games as well, as it doesn't depend as much on fast keyboard inputs, for example, but rather you choose your characters more carefully in order to get the best counter to the enemy. Initially, the game will feel a little bit chaotic, but especially after reading into the character descriptions a little more to know what which unit does, you will figure out that there's a decent amount of planning strategy that can go into the fighting once you figure it out. There are three different races in the game, the first one being Terran, kind of a human race that revolves around sort of soldiers and machines. Then there's Atlac, which is an alien race, I would say, with certain mystic creatures like dragons as well. And the third one is Yao Guai, which is kind of a beast animal kind of race. It's a bit harder to describe than the others because it has a bit of everything. For example, it has bone dragons as well. But those three kind of work a little differently in how you want to build them and which kind of units you want to send out in which amount. And that's something you figure out over time. And speaking of sending out units, there are different game modes that may require you to handle that a little differently. The game modes we're going to talk about here are 1v1 and 3v3, there's also a ranked mode and there will eventually be an arena mode. I couldn't look into those, so we're talking about the casual modes here. First, let's look at the 1v1 mode. In 1v1, you're against one opponent in that one lane and you fight them until one of you loses their base. There are some turrets defending the base before that, and there are some eggs in the middle of the map that I played. These eggs give you extra gold and extra spawns for certain characters when you destroy them. This means that your units will focus the eggs first until some enemy shows up and attacks them, which can be played strategically with certain characters. You can have a range character out of the aggro range and clear the eggs that way early, for example. So this is something worth keeping in mind early in the game, and then as the game progresses and as the eggs are destroyed, you will have more and more fighting between the characters, push towards the turrets, and eventually one of you will win. What you do in order to win is you choose your units that you want to pick and put them on the battlefield and ideally try to counter out the enemy's units. You gain currency over time, the green crystal at the top left, that will give you access to more units. If you buy a unit for the first time, there's a bit of an extra fee that you have to pay. Also, if you have units alive at the end of one round, they get a veteran bonus, which gives you some extra crystals. So there are certain strategical choices when it comes to spending your crystals, and you can spend it more or less efficiently depending on that. Furthermore, there is the wave timer, which you can see at the bottom, the blue line, which slowly goes down until it hits the end and a new wave spawns. At the same time, you see a number at the top right also indicating the time until the next round. There's also a wave number up there telling you which wave you're currently in. Another important thing that I didn't notice immediately is at the bottom right. There are so-called tech points. These tech points can be used on your unit by clicking on them and then selecting the upgrade option, which gives you certain benefits for all your characters of that kind, even those that are already on the battlefield. For example, giving them a little more damage or a little more health, or certain other benefits like true damage on special abilities, depending on which unit we're talking about. And the more expensive units here also need more tech points. You can, however, downgrade units from the tech points that they have and put those tech points on others if you'd like. Those are also gained over time throughout the fights. Now, this sounds like a lot to take in right away, but I will say that in the game you're gradually introduced to all these features until you're kind of comfortable with all of them. In the beginning I basically just spammed units and I was fine, and the more I got into it, the more I figured out these kind of tiny steps. You will also learn about the runes later on. The runes are like little benefits, for example, a little bit of extra movement speed or less ground damage taken, and you get those through your fights, through leveling up. You get extra points that you can spend on these runes as well, and so on. You can even create certain decks, both for your runes as well as your units, so you can have more than one deck of the Atlax or the Terrans or the Yao Guai and choose which deck you want to go into a fight against a certain opponent or whatever. Really, the amount of strategy you want to put into this is entirely up to you. There is also the option for 3v3. Now, 3v3 requires you to work as a team a lot more because there's more depth, as you can have different races or you can have different loadouts for your team than your allies, and you will all play in the same lane. So in the same lane where you previously played before as one person, you will be playing with 3 people. The map will zoom out when there's too many units on the field, and there's a lot of strategical mixing that you can do between units. If you want to do a certain rush on one player and the other one just stacks up points and gets very strong units right away or something like that. Obviously this is easier and better to coordinate with friends than with randoms, as there's not too much communication between you otherwise. I can only give you a very small glance of the 3v3 mode here, as it was a little more taxing in terms of performance when recording at the same time. I can tell you that off recording this worked absolutely fine. It was not laggy at all, it was very smooth. That's just when you try to use the recording software on the same device at the same time. So overall, I would say the performance is very good on this game, even in large-scale fights, which kind of impressed me considering that's a mobile game, and I really enjoyed playing it. It didn't ever feel like it was very clunky or choppy in between. Some additional points that I'd like to mention at the end here. Do not skip the tutorial, you have no way of going back to it, so if you want to learn the game step by step, that's your best bet to do that. So take a little of time when you first play the game in order to have that tutorial done. Also, the game does not seem to be pay to win. Generally, it seems like the transactions are mostly used for different skins for your characters. There are also things that you can unlock through bundles, but it seems like those don't really have a major impact because they are different characters, but they also cost more. So it doesn't really seem like you would get a major advantage out of that from what I can tell so far. Last but not least, I found the game incredibly addictive. I did not expect to spend as much time on the game as I actually ended up doing. I thought I was gonna play this through, check this out, but I actually ended up playing a fair bit more, playing up to level 12 or so. And the matchmaking is very, very quick. I barely ever waited longer than 12 seconds for a match, while at the same time being surprisingly fair. Now, my first matches were a little bit pub-stompy. Obviously, the system had to place me first because I had never played the game before, but after only a few matches, I already got matched against opponents that were very much even to me in terms of skill, and I had multiple matches that were so dragged out that they went up to the round where you can no longer do any commands, and basically the last waves battle it out among themselves before the game finishes, and that means that it should be relatively balanced if you get down to that round. So that is very, very positive in my opinion, because that's something we rarely see. It's just a very big player base from what I can tell, and it's a worldwide matchmaking system, so you can pretty much be matched against, well, anyone anywhere else in the world, and that means that you will quickly find a match. Due to the nature of the game, ping doesn't really affect that much either, which is very good. And so that all ends up being very nice in a very smooth experience when jumping into the game for the first time. So overall, I can absolutely recommend checking this game out if you have one of the devices that you can actually install the game on and play it on. The links to the game will either be provided up here or in the description down below, in the card or somewhere. You will find it anywhere where I'm be able to place it. And with that, thank you guys very much for watching. Hope to see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth out. Oh, and as we don't have an end card, I'm just going to talk a little longer here because I'm not home yet, so I can't actually give you the normal end card because I didn't transfer that over because I'm very smart. Instead, you'll have a few more words from me. And now, I will be peacing out. Bye bye.